Welcome to AEC Stories. This is former SM-3 Dempsey of the USS Mount Hood. And today, I have a special shipmate guest. Well, shipmate later after I get off the ship. So she carried the torch. This is OS2 Myers. And welcome aboard to your internet talking ship.
Thank you. Actually, it was OS2 Rios back then. But yes, I'm OS2. Well, I'm not an OS2 anymore. I'm just Cindy. But yes,
you know
that's
what,
me.
Cindy? We have to I just carry the name. I introduced myself at the mall, SM2 Dempsey, SM3 Dempsey, depending. I should have been an SM2, but they P&A'd me twice. There was no advancement in the rate. Did you ever go through any of that, trying to get first class or anything?
You know what? I knew of that happening to an SM1 on the Mount Hood. They actually made it to, he was the only SM1 that made it for the entire Navy that year. I'm trying to remember for that particular cycle. It was either in 97 or 98. But, it happened where things were kind of tight. And I took the second class exam 3 times before I made it. Maybe if I would have studied for it, I would have made it quicker. But I made it. It was good.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I went through it twice, and I was in med hold, and I was like, the signalman rate is once you leave the ship, you kind of lose sight of what you do. I mean, I think the same would be said for an OS. Like if you were away from your radars and tools and toys, from your CIC, and you're on shore duty doing some admin job or something totally not related, right?
Yes.
You'd be like, oh, well, I got to get schooled up again because, for me, it's all about sending flashing light and doing flag bags, and semaphore and all that good stuff. Yeah. And then they kind of look at your time as a signalman, I think, when they consider promoting you. So I don't know. I talked to a gentleman who was the SM2 for most of his career, and he probably ran into the same thing, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably so.
Did you get it first time, your second class?
No, I didn't. It was a third class third class I got first time up. Second class, it was 3 times. I had to take it 3 times before I made it, and actually made it on shore duty where I was doing something completely unrelated to being an OS, but I wasn't going to say no.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're only advancing so many people. It starts to sound like going to get a job at Google. Mm-hmm. Yeah, plenty of openings. Oh, you've applied. Sorry, those openings were filled very quickly.
Yeah.
That's it's silly how that works, but oh well. So you went into boot camp. What year did you go into boot camp again? You told me the other day.
1994.
Okay. So 1994, and you were telling me you were in the first mixed use. I'm calling it mixed use. Actually, it was double gender, whatever you want to call it.
Integrated company. Yes.
Yeah, what a mixed use company.
Yeah, I was actually a 900 company, and we were the drill team, choir, and band. And that's what it was. I was in company 903 in 1994, and well, it was very surreal. I mean, it's been a few years. I mean, it's been 24 years since then, and some things I remember just like it was yesterday.
Wow. So I don't know. You were up in Great Lakes, right?
I was.
Were you there in the winter time, summertime?
From October through December. So I kind of saw the fall go into winter, and oh my goodness, it was so cold there in the winter. So cold. I remember.
Did you get snow watch?
Yeah, we did. I had to do some shoveling, and I remember when we would have marched from our building, from our division building over to the galley. We would have to wear our ski masks and our knit caps and all sorts of things. And we'd march to the galley, and the condensation around our noses and our ski masks and around our mouths, they would freeze. We'd have,
yeah,
it would freeze. And
in order to breathe, you'd have to crack your nose and let the icicles fall out.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, even anything liquidy, my saliva or mucus, it freezes into ice.
It does. It did.
I didn't know it was possible until I went to the Great Lakes around the same time you did. I actually went November, December, January. So
yeah,
it's very I don't know. It's funny because you go up there. Sorry, dismiss that. You go up to Great Lakes, and not realizing it's one of the coldest places on Earth. I did my share of skiing and stuff growing up, but that was one of the coldest places I've ever been.
And I'd lived up north before. I lived in Wisconsin. I lived in Chicago too. So I knew cold, but I had lived in Puerto Rico for 6 years prior to that. So I kind of had to be broken in again. And what better way than boot camp, breaking me into the cold again.
Here's a shovel and wear 3 masks. We had to wear excessive clothes too because it was hitting. What did we wear? We wore our T-shirt. We wore a sweater underneath that. Mm-hmm. We wore our work shirt and maybe another sweater. I don't know if we had 2 sweaters. I think we had at least one. I know. And then we had the work jacket. Mm-hmm. Then we had the lined.
Yes, the raincoat.
We weren't wearing the pea coat underneath there, but we were wearing the lined trench coat, right? The watch coat.
Yes, I know. So we would make jokes about that, because they would tell us it was a T-shirt, followed by the dungaree shirt, followed by the black sweater, followed by the blue utility jacket, I think it was called, followed by the lined raincoat. And we're like, yeah, everything in locker compartment 2 or 1 and 2. Let's put that on.
It made me wonder while we were there in boot camp and dressed up like penguins, because that's really what we look like. And then you couldn't see anything because you had your watch cap, you had your ski mask, you had your, they made us wrap towels around our face. Did they do that with you too?
No, they didn't.
Well, I guess we hit one particularly cold, nasty spot. And this is all to walk to the chow hall in, right? Yeah. And you've got this, you look like a bunch of penguins. You can't see. You got 3 pairs of gloves. Mm-hmm. You're slipping and sliding like the Keystone Cops on ice that you can't see because you got these little pinchy little ski mask eye holes. Yeah.
Oh, you know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of whenever we had a march between NTC, from RTC to NTC, where we would have to go under this kind of like tunnel that was over a road, and we had to sing Anchors Away. Did you guys have to do that too?
Yeah,
I remember.
I had to do that too. The Anchors Away singing tunnel.
Yeah, the singing tunnel.
Yeah.
I remember.
They didn't have that part in the Rambo movie. No.
I think they skipped that, but it was kind of funny because I'd be marching, of course, with my company because that's what they were still called in '94. I think they changed them to, recruit divisions after that. And everybody would slip like in the same section. And as the song would progress, you'd hear people kind of like stumble with their lyrics while they literally stumbled to try to remain upright because of the ice. But that stays with me, that memory.
I remember going to take the Navy SEAL test. I had to run from, it was the first time I had any kind of freedom because I ran from the barracks all the way through that tunnel to the other side of the base. So I got a good little jog on. It felt good. I was like, free. I'm not marching. I'm moving at my own pace. Ha, ha, ha. It was kind of like 4 a.m. or something. Oh, my goodness. I remember that. But then it was like, liberty. I mean, did you guys have smoking back then? We did.
You know what? I think that our company commander made it to where we could not smoke or drink soda. He had that special rule. I think you could still do it, but he made it to where our particular company could not have soda or smoke cigarettes. But I think it was still allowed, and you could do it in the courtyard.
Oh, okay. So he was like imposing his own rules. He's like, I'm going to straighten you all up. It's like, we don't want our kids being naughty. Take the sugar away from them. I want them tired and under control. Yeah. That's funny. Now we had smoke breaks then, and we had an aggressive company commander, probably a little more aggressive than yours. And I wasn't there, but it was just the nature of the beast back then. You're in boot camp in '94, so I was there in '87. It was still like the Jack Nicholson kind of Navy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, The Last Detail.
No, I've seen clips of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just this, you got to see it to understand it. But I think it kind of it made me feel like that movie to me kind of captured the essence of what I thought the Navy was as a kid. I was like guys in dungarees hanging out in cold areas, laying on some Naugahyde couch in a barrack somewhere, waiting for a ship to go somewhere to do something. And maybe by by part of that, they might land on an adventure somewhere. But go ahead.
That
Sorry.
sounds probably like a generation thing rather. But I remember Top Gun came out like in 1984, 1985, and 1994 people are still talking about Top Gun. And so I was in the delayed enlistment program, and I never knew anybody who had served in the Navy before, so I knew nothing really about it. But every single day, between when I was done with high school and before I left in October, every single day I would watch Top Gun to try to, just keep the nerve going and stuff like that. But of course, naval aviators and what I actually did and whatever, there was no connection at all or anything like that.
That was the glamorous life. You're like, here's a swab. Hey, Tom Cruise didn't have a swab.
He did not. But, I was in San Diego, so I did make it a point to go to Kansas City barbecue and whatnot. And they had some of the scenes from Top Gun were filmed there. So I went there and whatnot. So, it was kind of cool doing that. Kind of full circle sort of.
No, Top Gun was the lick. I mean, that was popular. I went to that EM club where they filmed part of the movie, and everybody's in their dress whites drinking, and it's like you felt like you were in the movie.
That's cool.
You did. It was a trip. But I don't know. It was funny because my ex-wife got mad because we were at the video store, and I looked a lot like Val Kilmer when I was younger. So I'm wearing my Ray-Bans, my Wayfarers, and I look like the Iceman.
Who was my favorite character, by the way? He was my favorite character in Top Gun, Iceman. I thought he was great.
He's the volleyball player. I play volleyball better than you, Tom Cruise. No, he never said that. But yeah, it's like you go pray to your science, I'll pray to mine. We have two scientific religions. See you later. Those guys, they made that movie appealing. They sold the Navy. That was probably one of the biggest PR boosts ever to join the military. If you think about how the placement of Top Gun played out.
I wonder if Under Siege, the movie Under Siege, which I think is a better Navy film and probably a better film, Under Siege with, what is his name? Oh, goodness. Under Siege. Can't believe Steven Seagal. Have you seen that one?
Well, he's the cook.
Yes.
And he knows martial arts. I like the ship. I mean, I like, of the Navy movies, I like the ship. There's not too many Navy SEAL cooks that I know of.
Not exactly true to life. Maybe not true to life, but so enjoyable. What I think made it kind of cooler for me too was I actually served with a guy who was on the battleship when they filmed that. He was one of the extras, and he actually met Steven Seagal, and he said he was the nicest guy. And so maybe that kind of made an impression too a little bit. And maybe it's the music too, that I liked a lot. But I was a big fan of Under Siege. Still am.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm totally with it. I was talking to my friend about that recent movie Battleship, which is half sci-fi. But the best part of that movie is when the old salts, the old men that work at the museum, like, need our help, son? And then they go take on Godzilla with the battleship, which makes total sense because that's what I thought those ships were for when I was a kid. Shooting Godzilla.
You know what? I'm going to have to watch that now. But see, that's my problem is sometimes I hear a lot of reviews and they kind of sway me a little bit, but I might have to watch that. But talking about actors and movies and whatnot, I remember reading I think it was the Navy Times back in 94, 95. And I was stationed in Mayport, and they actually talked about Jack Nicholson. And they were talking about his role in A Few Good Men. But he had this big yacht. And apparently because he's Jack Nicholson, he pulled alongside a destroyer or something like that. I don't know, some kind of warship. And, and of course the people are like, who the heck are you? What are you doing here? But then it got across that it was Jack Nicholson pulling alongside them. And the captain, of course, is like, oh my gosh, yes, please come over. And so I heard that he was going on he's going down some ladder wells and whatnot. And somebody saw him, some sailor saw him, and he yelled, I want the truth. And Jack Nicholson, and all his character in A Few Good Men, he's like, you can't handle the truth. And everybody loved it. But, and I I know, that was
I
so
can see
cool. But
that.
he apparently was telling all the sailors, he was like, do not believe what I said at all in this movie about sailors. I love you guys and this and that. So I thought that was very cool.
There's an old Steve McQueen movie. Have you ever
I
seen
have
Sand
not.
Pebbles? We're
I
becoming the
think we
reviewers
are.
of these movies, by the way. It's okay. And there's it's something different for the podcast.
Sure.
It's not as linear. And people like listening going, "Oh, this is cool. Finally, you got one I like to listen
Different
to."
people can relate to it, and that's cool. Sand Pebbles. No, I've not seen that.
Well, that's an old
Mhm.
Steve McQueen one. And there's a lot of John Wayne. And two of the guys I had on here were both signalmen that hung out with John Wayne on the ship. It was like a heavy cruiser, which is just
Mhm.
one step below a battleship and above like what we have as a regular cruiser. As far as armament and big guns, like, yeah, that thing's a beast. And, John Wayne just wanted to hang out with the signalmen. And a lot of the officers are like, hey, John Wayne. And he's like, no, I want to hang out with the men. Let me over here and talk to these guys. And they're both great guys. They're in their 70s. It was really
great.
cool to talk to them.
That's great. Did you watch that TV show, The Last Ship? It's it's kind of one that's I think it's still on the air right now. It first started out about 2 or 3 years ago. Did you try watching that one?
I like that. I like the fantasy idea that one destroyer is controlling the world.
I quit after the first season, but it's kind of hard for me and my husband because he's a retired senior chief, and we would sit there together. And when things got a little foolish, we'd kind of poke jokes and stuff. Like, I guess there was one scene where they kind of sewed some sails together, and they put them on the mast, and I don't know. So we were just kind of laughing at that. And there was this other scene where the crew's kind of disheartened, of course, and I was like, you know what they need? I'm like, they need a steel beach. And I think in that very episode, they had a Steel Beach picnic. Yeah. And so,
Yeah. I was listening to who knows if this was ever, put on to us, but I was listening to this Marine talk about his time and this is a very decorated, injured Marine. And, he gives speeches. Sounds like a pretty amazing guy. So he was on that Jocko Navy SEAL podcast and he's talking to this guy. And he was like, Jocko used to be an officer and a Navy SEAL. So, it puts people, he goes, you want to make your guys bond as a team, put them in really hard situations and then do it some more and you'll get really great results. And that was kind of like, the misery that we would go through after long, rotations or exercises or whatever. All that was part of it. That's kind of interesting. That's the psychology of the military.
I know.
Little did you know,
as
right?
soon as I got out of the Navy and whatnot, it was easy to kind of shine in the civilian world as far as easy things like punctuality and whatnot, and just kind of keeping it together when other people were kind of losing their minds and whatnot. And it was funny because in those moments in, civilian world job hardships, it was so easy to shine, I thought, it was like, I've got more than this, I've got more. And so, I don't know. It set me up well, the hardships.
You saw the value. I didn't know what value I had. I had more than I realized. I never used it. I was like, I should have used that. I should have made an awesome resume. I would have had a nice fat job. But no, I ended up selling cars because I could wave at people with flags and they pull over and buy a car. No, I'm kidding. That's not how it worked. Yeah, it was a hell of an adjustment for me, but you were still kind of attached.
I was.
You were married to your husband, right?
It was a fun transition, kind of, because well, I could still see the Navy, and one of the most important parts of the Navy to me, and to any other sailor, I think, is the uniforms. Seeing the people in their, in their Cracker Jacks and whatnot, it just resonates. You can feel that. And I still got to see that with my husband, and I was able to keep company with him while he made rank and whatnot. And, I don't know, I was still around it until 2 years ago now. And, yeah, it was a big part of my life for many years.
How's that change overcoming you guys? I mean, you still have ID cards because he retired, right?
He is probably the best sailor that was never in love with the Navy, if that makes any sense. He did the Navy very, very well, but
Yeah.
he hated being out to sea. He hated being deployed. I mean, he did his job very well, but he was ready to be a civilian again, probably about the day he left for boot camp. But he did it for 20 years. He did it very well. So he's very happy to be out. He is. He misses the camaraderie. He does. And he misses some of his shipmates. And as a matter of fact, he saw some of his shipmates make Master Chief. And he's like, oh, I could have done that. It was only one more rank. And I'm like, no. I'm like, our time to go came and we left. And I was happy for it because, well, it's hard to keep a family happy, I think, when somebody is constantly gone. And that's my truth. That's what I believe, is the truth. I know lots of families, lots of couples with kids, they stay until 30 years if they can do it, but I can't understand that rationale. I can't, So, yeah, my husband got out at 20. We're happy and we're grateful, because we've got health insurance. My husband has his pension and he's using his post 9/11 GI Bill right now. So we thank God for the Navy for that, but we are happy to be civilian.
That's a heck of a GI Bill. That's
I
like
know.
E5 pay on
I had the
BAH.
Montgomery one, so
Yeah.
it paid for my bachelor's degree, but no, I didn't get not much else beyond that. But I'm grateful. Not to say I'm ungrateful, because I'm.
Yeah. Well, you might have a state one that'll cover you further. I mean, I know we're on a tangent, but this is interesting. People don't realize all the benefits. I have 100% from the VA. So that gives me a lot of the same stuff as a retirement person. The only thing I can't get is Space A flights. So the Space A, you might be waiting in line for that hookup,
Sure.
unless you're going somewhere like Hawaii, it might not be worth it, right? Local hop, like just go to Southwest. We'll get there already, but it is great for, like I said the other day to you, like all the different base hotels, because there's some land that the military has in beautiful locations like Key West or Cape Cod or, I think Nantucket, just different places you can go stay there. But you got to book in advance because there's a lot of ex-military and military people
I'm going to
thinking the
start
same
looking
thing.
into those things. My husband's still going to college right now, but as soon as he's done with that, I am definitely looking into that.
Campgrounds too. I mean, that's always good. There's military campgrounds that are unique. And sometimes on the water or lakes or different places, MWR places. But the state thing I was trying to tell you, like, there was a thing for my wife, which was either a stipend or the state paid for college. And state paid for college. So she got another master's degree, and that was perfect. So that was great, but it only covered the tuition, but that's worth
I don't
quite
think
a
I
bit of money.
qualify for anything like that because I've looked into it. I have, but I'm happy with what I have. I am very much happy with what I have, and I thank the Navy for that for sure.
I think you have enough to get whatever you want. I mean, especially if you add your military, plus if you have a bachelor's, that's plenty. Because you have a lot of experience. You have management experience, you have training experience, you have working with multi-million-dollar equipment. I mean, yeah.
I know.
How can you not
I guess,
have enough
the truth is,
right?
being an OS, it doesn't really translate too well to civilian job. And I wish it did because I really liked my job. I liked sitting there on the scope and looking for contacts and air contacts and, ship contacts. And every once in a while, a submarine would pop up. It was fun. It was fun being in that dark room that was very cold. And, but yeah, nothing like that really exists with the exception of being an air traffic controller. And I'm not interested in that. So, I feel like whenever I got out of the Navy, I had with the exception of a couple of collateral duties that I could kind of put on my resume, I felt like I had to shelf what I did being an OS. Like I really couldn't apply that to a job in the civilian world. And that was okay too, because I kind of knew that going in whenever, I became an OS because I was undesignated prior to that. And I knew jobs like, if I would have become an ET or something like that, or, an ice seaman or just any other rate, like I would have had some sort of bridge or foothold. But, and I gave it a kind of some thought for maybe 2 minutes, but I was like, no, I want to be an OS. It's exciting. And it was. I'm not sorry at all. Not sorry at all. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you were in the action. You know, I mean, it's like some
It
people liked being the postal clerk or the barber,
is. Mm-hmm.
and some
Yeah.
people liked working in supply,
Yeah.
and there was kind of like the supply
Yes.
mafia on ships,
You
like
had
they
to
had
make
all the
nice.
extra hookups, oh, we get
Yes, yes.
all the
You had
extra
to
ice
make
cream
nice
or
with those
whatever they
guys. And
got,
that's
right?
true, those guys, probably, could get another job on the outside, pretty easily, related, not I, but I am happy with the way things ended up for me. And I got out of the Navy in August of 2001, obviously 1 month prior to September 11th, 2001. But I did see, a
Wow.
couple of things. I did see some things that kind of stayed with me. There was a particular Alaska Airlines flight that crashed into the Pacific Ocean in 2000, and the ship I was on at that time, the
Hmm.
Fife, which followed my time on the Mount Hood, we were out there with a couple of other ships on our surface action group. We're just kind of practicing for our deployment, and we got the call saying that we had to head to that area to help the Coast Guard with the search and rescue operation to try to help them recover what came of that Alaska Airlines flight. But it didn't end well, of course. It went from being a search and
Hmm.
rescue operation to a search and recovery operation. And I was sitting in combat, CIC, keeping the logs, not outside with the lookouts or anything like that. But I heard things over the radios, of what was recovered from our ship and the Coast Guard ship and the other ships that were with us, and just really weighed on me. It really did. Because it's the civilian toll that I saw, innocent civilians, and it's not really what you kind of expect a little bit. Maybe I should have been in the Navy, but you know, they recovered
Right.
seat cushions from planes, and clothing, and sometimes the shoes of small children, and other more graphic things I don't need to get into that were recovered too. But that really stayed with me. It really truly did. And yeah, I got out the year after that, and to this day, I think about that. I do. But yeah, and yeah, and
Oh yeah. You get pulled in. Like I had a corpsman who went through like recovering a frigate that was wrecked up against a bunch of rocks in the Philippines in the 70s or early 80s that was smashed like 250-mile winds, and
yeah,
everybody on board, there's just people
I
floating
know. And
everywhere, kind of
actually,
like what you're
the
describing.
USS Cole bombing,
Yeah.
we had um we had left there just a month and a half prior to that, and there were ships with us that had refueled in the same port that the Cole had. And I remember when we pulled into, to Everett, when we were done in our deployment, somebody got on the 1MC. They talked about the USS Cole being bombed, and oh, it was just obviously horrible, of course. But I don't know. It's just when it's a sailor, something happens to a sailor, to a ship-bound sailor, it makes this impression on you, and it stays with you. It does.
It makes you feel vulnerable. You know, Part of my
Hmm.
issues all stem from being on watch and catching
Yes.
those potential type coal situations from happening to our ship. And as a signalman with night vision and, big eyes and stuff, I could see stuff that you
Yeah.
guys could not see, and, they're like zodiacs, low
Yeah.
profile rib boats, rubber, no ping, right? Unless you were maybe, I don't know what it's like if you
Dowels.
can detect those little pirate level
What's with
ships,
them?
those little tiny boats like a skiff, or
Yeah.
like, like you would use a
Hmm.
Zodiac to sneak on a ship, right? I mean, I'm just
Hmm.
asking you because you worked on
Yeah.
the Mount Hood. You probably can't do it.
Yeah.
Somebody sneaking up on you in the Gulf, because I caught people doing that.
That's yeah.
I
Thank
had
God
them
for
chased
that.
off
Sometimes
by a
if it
destroyer.
depending on the weather,
You
we could
know,
catch things on the scope and whatnot. And there was an occasion while we were on my last deployment in 2000 where I was the track supervisor, and we had two other ships with us, and me and this other OS2. I was a track sup, and he was the guy on the surface, radar, staring at that, and we saw this tiny little thing painting, and it was only painting on one
hmm
radar, because sometimes we would switch radars. Kind of, for people who don't really know who an OS is, it's kind of like switching a radio, maybe kind of trying to tune
yeah,
around to check in different radio stations, see if you get a better signal. But sometimes you can switch between radars to see if you can see something better. But anyway, we saw this tiny little blip on our scope. Just he and I were the only ones that saw this. And the other two ships, we were connected via link, the other two ships that were with us. So they were supposed to see the same picture as we were, but their radars were not picking up this little ship. And he and I were talking about it. He's like,
Right.
Should we drop this contact? I'm like, no, I'm not going to drop this contact. Something's there. We had the lookouts go and look outside, and they couldn't see anything. And we were the junior ship in this little surface action group. And then I started getting watch officers yelling at people, at the track supervisors on their ships, telling me to drop this contact. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then people on my ship were yelling, you need to drop this. I'm not going to do that. And so I'm getting all this heat. And then one of the watches on another ship spot this tiny little itty bitty wooden boat with 2 or 3 fishermen on it. And it was a ship the little tiny boat that I'd been tracking, and so there was no big fanfare or anything like that, but, I felt great. I felt really good. The fact that I'd stood my ground, and all I could think about is what could have happened if we didn't drop that contact, what if he would have been in the way of one of the other ships, so, yeah. And so me and that OS2, who's out of the Navy now, and he's in Australia
Good
now,
point.
but to this day, that's kind of one of our favorite moments, the day we stood our ground. They were like, you guys yell at us all you want, but we think something's here. And there was, Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you, like, being that the situational awareness, is different now because, like, I didn't understand why. I'm like, well, they're just softer. They're more marshmallow people. That's not the truth. I mean, electronics has really softened the brain, in some opinion, the mind. I mean, because you're distracted. You're in the hypnotic state, staring at a screen. Matter of fact, sometimes when I leave the cell phone or I leave internet, I'm doing it in my head. Like it follows me, right? Like there's some extra layover on that. But what I didn't realize is what you pointed out the other day is they're doing 10-month deployments. Okay. That is like doing a year of time in a sense, if you're all out at sea most of the time. That's a lot of work. I mean, 6 months, we thought that was rough, so Grandpa's not looking down his nose at you guys. Come on now. He's going, wow, that's impressive.
It's very dangerous.
And a little excessive.
Because whenever we had our 6-month deployments and whatnot, we had lots of breaks to look forward to. We're going to Australia. We're going to Thailand. We're going to Singapore and all the wonderful West Coast ports. So there were breaks, But I think from what I had seen from my husband's deployments and whatnot, they didn't have very good high quality port calls or anything like that. And they work these guys like crazy, and gals, of course. When I say gals, I'm generalizing men and women, by the way. But
no, I mean, after I left the Navy, it was a man and woman Navy. You could not differentiate one from the other. I was there just in the beginning. The Mount Hood was one of the tenders already had women. The Mercy already had women. It was the Mount Hood is where they really started integrating more women. The Mount Hood and probably several other AEs, auxiliary class ships, and then eventually they ended up at combatants. So
yeah, of course,
guys is guys and gals. I mean, it's everything across the board.
It's interesting too. It's a danger about working these guys and gals so hard too. Hard. It's how dangerous it is. I think there was was it the USS, the John McCain, how they hit a tanker or something like that, a commercial tanker, and a bunch of sailors died. Oh my goodness. That affected me it didn't affect me personally. I don't want to say that because that's too cavalier, I think. But it was OSs on watch that I imagine that might have caught this, and other people that might have caught this, but they didn't, and lots of sailors died. And I remember being on Facebook and talking to other former OSs about it too, and how this was so shocking to us that this could happen. And we kind of asked ourselves, I'm like, is it the sailors' fault or is it the Navy's fault? Because you're just, I hear that manning has gone down, but they're demanding more and more out of the sailors that are on watch. And there's no break, so I don't know.
Well, the watch is the watch is the watch. I've done 8 on, 8 off, 8 on, 8 off, 8 on, 12 on, 8 off. I've done, 12 on, 8 off, wake up at 4 of those hours in, go back and do drills and go back to sleep. No back, you're on. You know how it is, right? So I was attributing it to situational awareness. I think there's too many distractions. I'm like, what if I was on the signal bridge and I had an iPad? How good of a lookout would I have been? And I go, I probably would have been hypnotized by it. And I go, there's more electronics and cell phones. And I mean, you used to only get to watch the movies when I was in the ship when they played them in your berthing, you know? Yeah, Sight TV, exactly. Right. And, that was how that happened. And then, geez, now you could watch them up on your iPhone. You know, you could call your husband and wife. We used to go detached, old Christopher Columbus style Navy. Like we talked about on the last podcast, that got squished a little bit.
Yes,
you know, it's like
the desert duck.
The helicopters would bring our mail and we'd be so excited.
And, regular letters and whatnot. Yeah, I remember that. And I remember transitioning to regular email too and whatnot. But yeah, you're right. Ironically, the Navy, the pioneer of technology, GPS, this and that and the other thing, and probably even chat rooms, it's gotten to a place. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's what you were doing, so Xbox One gaming with all the other ships.
I know. Group that contact. No, I'm not going to do it,
Right, it's real life contacts. Yeah, that's right. That's interesting. So would you say you were in the same ship as I was, which was not the radar beast of the, combatants that you went to later?
Yes.
Was it like black and white television to big screen,
Mount Hood,
4K, high definition?
And I'm like, yes, somebody's giving me a tour of CIC now. And I walk in and it was so small. It was so tiny. And I was like, is this it? And I'm like, yeah, this is it. And I walked around because I kind of didn't want to believe them. But I walked in, and to the left, you walk into the space. To the right was a desk and the bulkhead. To the left was a chart table and another bulkhead. There was a scope, another scope that didn't work, the DRT table, and a couple of and a wall in the back with some walls that you wrote on, and that was it. Yes, mow boards and stuff like that. We had a mow board station and whatnot, and but you know what? What's kind of ironic too, though, is I became very, very good at mow boards and low tech OSing on that ship. And whenever I went to the Fife, that was a warship, I was much, far faster at mow boards and things like that than a lot of the people who had been on warships.
Yeah, you had more of that human connection. To the rate. There was a connection between you and the rate, and that's what I talk about. For me, it was the situational awareness. Like I said, it's because if you would have had my signal crew, you would have not had that wreck. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Because we used to compete with you OSs. We'd be like, hey, get a contact 020, 18 miles out, destroyer. Like, how the hell did you get that? We were so good.
Yeah.
We would just like, the human radar was not something to be played with. Because, the big guys, like I told you, I caught, guys trying to sneak up on our ship with, probably want to do a lot of harm. All blacked out, dressed in black, There was Iranian Navy. There was all these jihadists and all these kind of people floating around the Gulf long before it became a big thing on Twitter and the news. We were floating around up in that. And before the coal, I could feel that stuff. I had like a sixth sense, I could tell what was about to go down, And when I did, I felt really bad for fellow sailors and their families. It's just that I know that, there comes a point where the bully that, one day, let's say the big strong guy's trying to be protection for you and, he's eating a sandwich and someone hits him on the head with a tray, That's kind of what happened. But had he been aware,
changed. Not
the other
that
people wouldn't hit him in the head with a tray or whatever.
I know
what
exactly
I'm saying.
what you mean. I do. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, there was the anti-piracy operations. There's so many other things that came about because we were having troubles in the shipping lanes in Somalia.
Yeah.
And that's their main level. That's their main industry.
There was definitely, some areas whenever we were like traversing the Straits of Malacca or something like that, and it would be drilled into us before we got there. Days we are going to be hitting the, not even the days before when we were in OSA school. They're like, you guys are going to hit places that are called the Straits, and there's going to be so many contacts out there. You're going to go through all the alphabet 2-3 different times, and for people who don't know, are familiar with OSs and tracking, it's, it's midnight or 001, and you got your first contact and you don't know what it is. You call it contact Alpha. Next one's Bravo and Charlie. So what happens when you get to Zulu? You go to Alpha Alpha, Alpha Bravo. Now, yeah, yeah, I know. And so into, I think it was on the Mount Hood
Alpha
deployment. I
Alpha,
think we
Alpha
got to
Bravo,
be
Alpha
at
Bravo, Charlie.
Alpha, going through the Straits of Malacca. And there was just so much stress, because
Wow.
you're worrying about collision, with other ships because of traffic issues. You're worrying about terrorists. It's a lot of stress, and you stay on watch. And back then we were on watch a lot. I was port and starboard every 6 hours with work days on top of that. So I was on watch every 6 hours and whatnot. But, for serious situations like that, it was, everybody was there, and, it was really tense. But as soon as you leave the Straits and the contacts weren't as many, you just relaxed a little bit. And I love that. I love that part, being done with that sort of
My incidents from that was during Desert Storm. I didn't sleep for like 9 days because I felt like if you didn't catch it down there in OS, EW didn't see anything. The lookouts didn't see anything, and it was only me and my other signalmen were asleep, then I'm only going to rely on me. You see? And that's why I stayed awake. And it wasn't really their fault. Luckily, I was on watch looking around. I just had this feeling.
I know.
I even spotted a mine and had us avoid a mine, and we were not a minesweeper. We had big eyes. You can't skim those with skim those with the Mount Hood radar. And even our ops boss, because I had him on here, he's like, that was all cool. I didn't know what you're talking about. Then I realized we had just sailed through the mine area.
And I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
so it's like you
he knows that I'm not making it up to sound cool.
Turn it off, and you
don't have any medals for it.
And sometimes I would overreact to situations too. Like I remember I would be like, we'd pull into Middle Eastern port and I'd have a port watch or something like that. I just felt like I couldn't relax. I would question everything I saw. Like if I saw flashing lights somewhere, I'm like, okay, who is that? What's going on there? And the OD would be like, relax. And I'm like, I can't turn it off. I just can't do it. And I wonder if it has something to do with what kind of rate you might have been to, like a signalman or QM or an OS or something.
Yeah, where we had this radar mindset where we were looking to the horizon or whatever as far as we could get, looking for that thing that might be, against us.
And, I know it's hard.
You're trying to spot the big bad wolf before he spots you.
You just can't relax, and
right.
You always wonder, okay, I just got relieved off of watch and whatnot. Are things going to be okay? You're gonna have to wait and see.
Right. So that's the situation that I see, and you and I had that same thing in common. I don't know. I couldn't just be like da di da. I realized like, okay, you're going to a dangerous place. And like Straits of Malacca sounds like another thing that's very dangerous as well. Sounds a lot like the place where those ships that hit each other, it's like you go from working in an airport that might have 50 inbound flights, and now you've got 5,000, you got to ramp up to that. Right. So you're just like, yeah, over here.
He was a sonar technician. Yes.
I can imagine, and then your husband was, you said, a sonar tech?
They use them enough because they've got their equipment, and my God, if he was here, he'd be yelling at me at the name of the equipment they use. Just the sonar stuff and whatever that they would turn on and whatever. But there was all sorts of concerns. I'm not saying they're invalid, but about marine life. And if they would turn on their equipment, are they going to kill more whales? Is that why whales are beaching themselves? But so, that was one thing I was scared of too as an OS. As an OS, we kind of had to worry about different warfare areas. We're trained in anti-air and surface and submarine warfare. That was something I was petrified was of submarines, I really was, because we're just kind of floating targets,
I just found a former high school classmate who's an admiral now, Yvette Davids, and I guess she's teaching a class on that. We've talked a little bit on Facebook. I think I mentioned her before. It's like, yeah, now she's teaching that. I go, I feel kind of safer because we grew up overseas in Italy, and there's a lot of terrorist activity. The general of one of the bases get kidnapped, General Dozier, by the Red Brigade, which was a terrorist organization in the 70s, 80s. and they even killed the president of Italy. They
Yes.
kidnapped and killed him. That's how dangerous these people were. Like,
Oh.
people thought they were so safe, kind of like the coal, until someone says, okay, boom, here we are. You know what I mean? And then they realized, okay, that changed. And then there'd be
Yes.
terrorist threats, and there'd be,
Yes.
you know, when I moved there, the thing in Munich happened where all those Israelis were attacked at the Olympic Games. So there's all kinds of exotic terrorism threat stuff. So I know that I grew up in that environment aware, and so did she. So I think something comes from that. Like we talk about you and I
Yes.
being in ops, being on jobs that require being on watch to identify, right? You know, and look out for bad guys. So I'm like, oh, well, if it's you, you're pretty cool. I feel safe at night knowing that you're running the fleet. You're teaching this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you didn't just grow up and you were a champion Xbox player and now you're out there. I don't know.
Yes, that's true.
Not to say that might not
But,
be more
it's kinda
relevant
funny,
today with today's technology.
I gotta say,
since
what
we
I'm
get
still
out,
thinking
right?
about is just what we were talking about, how you can't relax, and whenever you've got this job where it's so important, where you're vigilant all the time and watching, I think I still have some of that, like whenever people are walking like outside my house and whatever, I'm like, who are you? What are you doing here?
Yeah. I might need to talk to you about that. You might have a little benefits coming.
Sure. Yeah.
That's an aspect you don't know about. I mean, I'm not trying to be your doctor online or make any accusations, but I suffer from hypervigilance.
Yeah.
That's part of PTSD. Hypervigilance, I'm like aware. And then when I get in big crowds, boy, that thing just goes off like the streets of Malacca. Like, don't take me to a rock concert. You know what I mean? And don't put me in bad traffic either. I will just break, and it's so yeah, those are the things that, that hypervigilance. It's like once you crack the shell, it doesn't go away. It's like your spider sense. You like feel things.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is like whenever my husband would go out to sea and it was just my son and I.
Does that ping your radar?
I would pay attention to every, you know what? And I'm not going to say this is because of the Navy, the OS. I know this is many regular civilian spouses of military who had this too, but any sort of noise, I would hear something in the house in the middle. Yeah.
There's a picture of my husband on Instagram.
In the middle of the
seen
night,
anybody
I would
for
hear
6
a little
months.
noise.
There
like,
they are. There they are. They're in
somebody breaking into my
Thailand
house right now. What's going on? And so in my mind, I cataloged every single noise that I would hear at night. If it's just the floor creaking because it's hot or something like that, if it's the refrigerator or the central air, or my son went out and got to the bathroom, I would have this catalog of sounds in my head and whatnot. But it was funny. As soon as my husband comes home, I would relax entirely. And interestingly, ironically enough, we were probably more in danger when my husband would come home because he's such a heavy sleeper, and I felt like I could relax when I was the house might have even been safer when I was alone because I pay attention to everything. So I don't know.
It was, the hypervigilance thing is a monster. I have it. Yeah. I've had it for ever since the 90s, late 80s. Yeah, it's something that comes with the territory, and people don't realize. You think I get a lot of speeding tickets? Nope. You know what I mean? Sure. I'm used to scanning the horizon while I drive. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm trying to be the biggest rebel and hit 200 miles an hour. Now the cops listen to this podcast. They're like, we're going to be following you, Mr. Dempsey, Mr. Podcaster. I'll catch you. But no, I totally see that, like getting out of the Navy. So what did you want to do when you get out? Are you still on a mission to do something else or recreate? I mean, did not know. What did you want to do when you grew up? I guess that's how we looked at it when we got out of the Navy, right? That's what I wanted to do. When I got out of the Navy, being a mom is awesome. Being a mom is my favorite thing. I love being a mother. It's wonderful. And I wanted to be able to do that in a way that there was no interruptions to that. But, I needed more than that. I was in the Navy for 6 years and whatnot. I was kind of, a bit of a feminist. And when I got out of the Navy, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I kind of found out that this happens to a lot of veterans. It kind of takes a while for you to kind of, shelf the Navy thing and kind of relax enough to where you can see yourself being something else. And interestingly, I
I realized I wanted to be an
Right.
anthropologist. It's, people who study humans and whatever and culture.
Right.
But there, I was prudent though, and I realized, there's not that many jobs for that out there. And I got a degree in business and whatnot. So, which is a lot more marketable, but it's interesting though. I've heard that of a lot of veterans. They just don't know what to do. And it takes them like maybe even a year sometimes for them to kind of put something, have not an original thought, but have a thought about an occupation that has nothing to do with the military, And I actually started a Facebook support group for for veterans and spouses and stuff like that. And it's on Facebook, and I think we got almost a couple thousand members now or something like that. But we talk about things like that there, and benefits and this and that and the other thing. And when my husband was about ready to retire, I tried to coach him a little bit too. I was like, it's probably going to take us a while before we figured out what it is you want to do and whatnot. And he got out of the Navy and he worked for about 6 or 7 months before he decided to go back to college and get another degree doing something else.
Was it easier for him to get a degree once the online degrees and stuff popped up? I mean, did that change the game for sailors? Because there was no way I was going to get a degree. We would have maybe
my husband, he had a
3 credits towards an associate's degree out at sea.
And he was able to finish a bachelor's degree in business with concentration in human resources. And he was able to leverage a lot of those credits to apply to a bachelor's degree in nursing. He's getting his BSN right now. So that's what he's getting right now. So he was able to do that, and the Navy facilitated a lot of that.
Well, nursing is a good profession because you stay with the cost of living with the profession. Yes. And my wife's waiting for the paperwork for a job in healthcare in the data centers in the data science world. So I totally relate. I mean, I know that hospitals, they stay with the times. There's some professions you're making the same as you did 20 years ago, and you're like, oh, geez, milk's gone up 10 times, but my paycheck's the same. That's kind of tough.
That's the plan.
But no, it'd be nice. So he's going to go from there and then go into nursing. I mean, you guys will be set. So you're momming up, and there's going to come a point where your son
that's what I'm kind of thinking about a little bit. And I actually homeschool
so you're
my
have
son,
to go, well, what do I want to do?
A little bit more relevant to him. I need to be around more right now. Yeah, I need to be involved. But I do have other interests though. Like I write. I'm a writer too, so I do that. But
you're involved.
I don't know.
You're involved. Yeah.
I do work for my local government here. I was appointed to a volunteer position here, but I've got, I'm kind of trying to find my own thing again that's independent of being a wife and independent of being a mom and whatnot. And I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm getting there.
We've got to maintain our own identity. And so that's why the Navy's so strong. You're like, that was me. That was all me. Wait, okay, I'm back. I didn't start reflecting on the Navy until I went and filed for my benefits because I get out on a medical discharge. I had a motorcycle accident and a few other things that happened while I was in. So I don't know why I didn't file for it. There just wasn't any advertising. Like the VA says, come on down. Hey, sailor, messed up, have any injuries or these 22 issues? Come on down and see us. We can help you out. There was never that message. It's almost by design. I thought the VA hospital was only for people that were quadriplegics and stuff like that. I didn't know that it pertained to other things, that weren't necessarily a limb missing or whatever, right? And matter of fact, I thought it was for retirees. I was so confused about it, right? And I mean, I'm a smart enough guy, but there was no roadmaps. And there was a guy that used to come to the VA hospital when I was on med hold trying to process out of the Navy. And he had a ponytail and he'd drive this red Mercedes convertible. He was like, hey, man, I can get you all money. There's this thing. And I'm like, he sounds like a scam artist. But the truth was, he was speaking the truth. I just didn't. His character, I identified with the military. I didn't trust some long hair guy at the time. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
What are you saying over there, Shady Jackson? Like, oh, no, it's a smart guy with a ponytail. You're So I was really skeptical about who I was going to take any advice from getting out of the military. Did you experience that same thing?
There's a lot going on whenever I got out of the Navy.
Because you're used to your way, your religion of the Navy.
I had a daughter who was very ill, and she was in the hospital a lot. So that was going on in the background at the same time that I was getting out of the Navy. So
Hmm.
a lot of my preoccupations were there. But no, my husband had to deal with the VA and whatnot because he developed eczema while he was in the Navy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so he gets a little bit of something for that, just a tiny little bit of something for that. So we're grateful for it.
Well, a lot of people develop tinnitus. I'd advise filing for that too. You know,
That would do it.
I know I have it. My ears start ringing. I'm like, what the hell is that? And that was by being near those guns where they were firing them off out at sea. You know,
Sure.
that'll, well, Signal Bridge, you're pretty exposed, but I think the gunner's mates heard it worse than I did. And anybody who was below decks or near there, that was only on the Mount Hood little 3-inch guns. Those were nothing compared to what
It was the
you
Mount
had on
Hood
the combatants.
and the USS
So how many ships did you serve on?
It started out as shore duty in Florida, yes.
Wow.
It was a naval station,
So
Mayport.
Mount Hood,
I was at harbor operations.
and then you had some shore duty in Florida too?
And I drove small boats to do boom jobs, to put oil containment boom around ships so that if there was an oil spill, it would contain itself to the area around the ship. We did delivering paint floats. And that's when I was a deck seaman. And then after that, I went to OSA school, followed by the Mount Hood, followed by some shore duty, and then after that I was on the Fife. Somebody
Without, and then all
on
of a sudden
the
a whole
Mount
bunch because of
Hood
Facebook.
that went to the Fife too, right around the same time I was. So it was really nice seeing her over there. But Facebook kind of brought everybody back, and I was able to talk to people I hadn't spoken to in a ton of years. So, and my husband and I, because we served on the same ship, we have a lot of common friends too. So because he would hear from somebody, I would hear from them too. So there was that as well. I have not. I have not been to any reunions. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania right now, kind of far from
Have you been to any
the West
reunions
Coast,
or anything?
And that's where the ships that I was stationed on, that's where they were. So no, I haven't really been to any reunion.
Yeah, I get it. They're fun. Me and about 7, 8 other shipmates hang out like every third week of the month, usually.
Wow.
Pretty consistent. Yeah, these are guys I've known for 30 years. And, it's good to see people do well in their lives. I mean, they do everything from being building inspectors to, working for the county to, retiring as an officer and all that different kind of stuff. So it's pretty nice.
I hope so.
So what do you think?
So,
I mean,
right
do you
now,
think
again,
that,
because I homeschool my son,
you will go to some of those reunions in the future when time permits? I mean, once your son's a little more grown up, or
very good chance of that I hover, and my son's trying to let me know that. He is trying to let me know that I hover too much. But I know, but I do see friends and old shipmates of mine, and I think I'm like, man, it would be good to see this person again. It would be good to catch up with this person again, and a lot of these people, a lot of them are females for the most part. And a lot of them are in the same stage of life that I am, where they have small children. And so they're kind of distracted. And a lot of them are in different towns than I am. But no, there's a few of them that I was like, man, I would love to I'd like to have one more beer with this person, or I'd like to sit down for a while and reminisce a little bit with this person too, So I'm hoping that there's time for that in the future.
There has to be. You have to make that time. Like I said, it took me 20 years or more to start hanging out with shipmates again, or even talking to them, or even remembering that I was in the Navy. Like 25 years.
Sure.
Yeah, just give or take. Oh, it's 20 years. I'm not that old. Jeez, I'm only 50. Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think I was like, I didn't start touching back in the military till I was 45, so 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, I've made videos and done a podcast and had a couple of meetups and hung out with a lot of shipmates, and it's been really cool. And you realize there's nobody like those people you met there in the civilian world per se, unless they served, because you're around this unique culture. You kind of have the same expectations. You wonder what it was that you missed,
some of course,
and you realize
the most dangerous
you're all
and
on the same
stressful
level,
situations in my life, they were there, and I don't know if I'll ever have a position, a working position where things will be as stressful or as dangerous as, when I'd been in the Navy. But if I could serve with those people again in some sort of way, I think that would be cool. That would be cool.
It's so bizarre to look at it and go, and what you were dealing with over in combat and up in CIC and all the potential dangers and threats, or had you just get out of school and worked at a grocery store and become head clerk
It
and now you're
does, and
store
it's
manager
just
and
the
you
things,
never get exposed to
yeah,
that
the
life? It's
places where
kind
you
of
just
James
end up,
Bond-esque,
yeah,
or
I joined
female
out of
version of
Puerto
that. You
Rico
know what
when
I
I was
mean?
17, and
It's
had
it's
I not
adventurous
joined the
for sure.
Navy and had I not been stationed on the ship I was on, I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't be living here in Pennsylvania. I have no family here in Pennsylvania, but it's where my husband is, where his people are from, and I'm happy here, and it's very, it was a wonderful opportunity for
Right.
sure. I'm very,
It goes back to that thought. Like a lot
yeah,
of like, people's lives can be very linear and predictable, or you join the military and you get to see what comes of it. And if you're willing to roll with random and take those dice and roll and see where that takes you,
yeah,
you live an adventurous, fulfilling life.
sure.
You know,
Hmm.
how did you think? I grew up in Italy. I'm over here living in California. I have no relatives here except my daughter and my wife.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like my mother lives on the East Coast. My brother lives on the East Coast. The rest of my relatives live on the East Coast. I'm out here in California holding on for what? I don't know. California dream. What is the dream? Sometimes you see peaks and, and you're like in it for a minute and then you see, oh my gosh, it's the high cost of living. So
the traffic's bad. Traffic's really bad.
Right. You're like, hey, you want to cruise down California? Go down the
Yeah.
highway. Wait a second. It's $4 a gallon. Oh, reverse.
Yeah.
No, kidding. Traffic's impossible. You need a flying car that's built on electricity. You need a flying Tesla. But there's the fantasy and then there's reality. But there is the beauty and there is the romanticism of meeting your husband at sea. And now you live in a place you never would have predicted. But when you were 19,
there's just no,
or 18 when you joined,
and it's just
you might have said, "Then
it's
I'll,
interesting that you go back to
marry
that
an admiral and live in Hawaii." Who knows what you would have thought? I'm just making that up. I'm writing the book, right?
Whatever. When you're single, there's so many possibilities. When you're young and whatnot, there's just so many choices. But you make a couple little choices that lead to a couple bigger choices and whatnot, and things go down the way that they do. But yeah. Life used to be, I don't want to complain about now. I'm not excited about it. I am excited about my life now. I love my family life. I love that. But there's a certain kind of excitement that comes to being 18 and 19 and unmarried, no kids, stationed on a ship. What's coming next? We just don't know. And it's exciting.
That was what I missed. I mean, it's like, there was some beautiful intrigue to that. And, you never knew what the weekend was bringing.
Yes.
It could be bang or bust. You could be having an amazing time, or it could be another lame day hanging out the laundromat. Yeah. So this is just, you had that day too, right? We all had that day in the Navy. So broke, I can't pay attention. Oops, where'd my paycheck go? Those were the oops, where did my paycheck go?
Yes.
Those were amazing days. Like I wouldn't buy a car because I would be out at sea for 6 months. So why the hell am I going to have this car payment?
Sure.
And then I come in the shore, and I wasn't married at the time. I got a car later after I got married and all that. Had the extra money to afford it and pay for the apartment and all that stuff. Cost of living adjustment. But on my paycheck, no way. I remember those things. But yeah, where will you end up? I had these really amazing fantasies in my head that California was going to give me everything I saw in the movies. I guess it gave me part of it. It did, for sure. It definitely, there's a price to pay for every adventure and fantasy you have that you may want to manifest. Like, I want to know what it's like being married to a girl from a wealthy family and blah, 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 blah.
I know what you mean. It's like as soon as I became like a mother,
it's not as nice as you think it is. You're in the military. Remember, that's the way they look at you.
What I wanted most, as soon as I became a mom, I wanted the four walls around me, not bulkheads. No gray. There's no haze gray in my house, by the way.
I'm saying a lot of wall here. You're saying a lot of wall.
No,
wall
but
talk.
I
know you'd gone too far.
You're
like, yep, my bulkhead's like one of those people like a lifer for life past lifetimes.
Once I had a kid, once I had my daughter and whatnot, And I know I mentioned only having a son, just to kind of fill you in. I had a daughter, but she's no longer with us. She was very ill, and she passed away when she was 3.5. Thank you. And that happened right around the time that I got out of the Navy, which is kind of why, I just kind of had focus issues at the time. But that's a different conversation. Don't necessarily want to go down that tangent. But before I knew how sick she was,
Right.
and I was just a mom, I loved it. I
understand.
loved it. I no longer wanted the open seas. I'm like, I wanted a home with the family. And that's what that's what I wanted facilitated, was to have a husband and the kids and that security. And, whenever that time came, I
Right.
was really happy for it too. I was. I still am.
I can see that. I mean, that's for
Gordon
me.
Gekko?
I think I wanted to be rich. I think I
Was it
watched
Gordon
the
Gekko?
movie
Was that the name
Wall
of the
Street,
protagonist?
and I was like, yeah, I want to be like that guy. And like
Yeah.
some girls probably join the. Pardon me?
Mm-hmm.
Gordon Gekko, yeah, that was kind of attractive. Gordon Gekko was attractive. That idea, or I'd see some of the way some guys were living in other movies. I'm like, yes, I want to be like the movies, but were they practical? Not really.
Yeah.
That was a movie. Some girls probably joined the Navy.
I think
to marry
Iceman
Tom
was
Cruise.
more reliable than Maverick, because if you think about it, he didn't have to cheat.
Or the Iceman. Probably more Iceman than Tom Cruise.
Maverick,
I'm thinking.
He's having to, go all sort, fly outside of areas he's not supposed to be to try to bring in the same results that Iceman would deliver, without cheating.
That's so true. And I'm a lot. It's funny. I could have met Val Kilmer. I always liked him in movies, but I could have met him because I was working with this personal trainer guy doing his social media stuff in LA, who works with all the most famous people. And he's like, yeah, he's here. He came down here. He's out of shape. I'm like, that's funny. I'm out of shape. I'm sharing everything with Val Kilmer. He needs to lose 30 pounds. I need to lose 30 pounds. What are we, parallel? But, it was, I liked the movie. I liked the idea of how it made the Navy look. And I looked through time. I go, there's not a lot of Navy movies. There is, but there isn't. There's like a lot of, maybe it was cheaper to make Navy movies in the 40s, Admiral, can we use your ship? We're shooting a film with Warden McCluskey or whatever.
That's true.
I don't know how hard it is as far as production, like there's CGI and everything. We can make the ships out of nothing now with cartoons. But so you have you've done such a great job on this podcast. I appreciate you coming on. And we're going to do more podcasts because you're my number one female guest. So, and you're good to listen to. So this will be part one for all you listeners out there in cyberspace that listen to AEC stories. And we'll get more into her story next time around. But today we just rolled. We just, there's no agenda. That's what a podcast is. We're discovering the conversation as well as the listener. It's not like we're newscasters here today on AEC stories. We're going to talk about 1971. No, none of that stuff. But thank you for being on. And I am going to upload this